Hiking in the woods with mom and her girlfriends so they could burn off all their crazy. I learned that when you are dating, some men will say, I know a good place. Then they take you to.
Um, Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this February 6th meeting of the City Council, regular meeting of the City Council. Our first item on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. And Mary Flowers, will you please lead us in the pledge? Thank you. This time is time for communications from the public. This is communications from the public on any matter that is not a public hearing, an open public hearing this evening. And with that, I will ask any member of the public that wishes to address us, please step forward.
Our office is at 135 South Main in Kalispell. I have a couple of issues. One, it would be nice to clarify if there is public comment during your discussion of the WB-T zoning. It's listed a couple of different ways in the agenda, and if not, I'll just go ahead and make a few general comments.
Thank you, Mary. The way I read the agenda, Michelle, is that the public hearing is closed on that matter. Is there any movement from the council to reopen that public hearing at this point, or do we leave it closed? You can make your comments now. Great.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. And you should have received a written comment. I want to start by saying that I appreciate the many hours that you've spent looking at this, and I think you're clearly hearing the public and moving in a positive direction in many of the changes that have been suggested. I am encouraging you to relook at your intent and purpose. I think this is an often overlooked part of a zoning regulation because it's not listing the specific uses so much as it is listing the character and the quality of growth that you are attempting to create, a pattern of growth that you are attempting to create in this area. And I think I've provided some language to that regard. Just some housekeeping things. I think your ordinance currently listed does not list the most current finding of facts, and I would encourage you to adopt the most current finding of facts as part of that ordinance. I believe they're dated February 6th today. This is a new staff report and findings. Again, the term accessory apartments appears both as a permitted and a conditional use, but there's no definition for that in the Whitefish zoning code. So if what that is intended to mean is accessory dwelling units, that should be clarified because there isn't a definition for accessory apartments. The same thing with light commercial and its ancillary services. There's no definition and they're not a permitted use within the listed or conditional use per se. And so I think they should be removed from the purpose statement. Again, clarification on what light manufacturing is and light assembly. You have definitions that clearly outline those in your zoning definitions. I think you and the public and the applicants are all better served by using definitions that are already in your code. When you don't rely on those definitions, then you're putting your planning director, zoning administrator in the difficult position of being forced to decide what that really means when push comes to shove on a application before you. So I think it's best to be most clear at this stage. The other thing in terms of the development standards, particularly when you look at the last proposal that came for the Highway 40 and 93, most of those units were inward facing, and so the rear setback, as proposed in this regulation, does not address having that extra 50 feet for the rear setback. And so I think it's really important, because of these corner lots and the odd sizes, that all of your setbacks, whether it's front, side, which do currently include that 50-foot setback, but you add it to your rear setback as well so that it's consistent. And look at the minimum lot coverage. I think the consensus I'm hearing is that everyone would like to see generous landscaping. And if you currently have no lot coverage, no minimum lot coverage, then that's harder to achieve. So I would encourage you to look at that. On a very different issue, I just wanted to, and I think you've probably been following this issue of the county is looking to build a composting facility south of the Wiley Dike area, about a mile north of Flathead Lake. They are looking to purchase, I think it's somewhere around 35 acres there to put this facility on, and then to take all of the septic waste in the county, which is 30,000 systems, would then be directed to that facility. The solids would be removed, and the liquid would be pumped over to the lakeside sewage treatment plant, which doesn't have a point source like City of Whitefish, Kalispell, Columbia Falls, and rather they spray apply that material to the fields. The area that this is being proposed in the annually has groundwater depths of up to as high as 5 feet. So this is an area of concern. We have no disagreement that the county needs a facility to service. We don't have adequate facilities for septic waste in the county. And I understand you, of all of the three cities, have the least need for your biosolids, but that you're also considering taking some of your biosolids to this facility. So the county is scheduled on February 15th to make a decision about purchasing this land. After that, there still are environmental assessments and public comment opportunities before Lakeside. Lakeside hasn't even submitted a permit to get this effluent from the plant. And I hope that city officials like you will raise questions. Not only are we looking at nutrients, phosphorus and nitrogen, but we're looking at forever chemicals. A lot of medicines, cleaning products, chemicals that really don't need to be applied, where they're not removed by our septic systems for sure, and not by our sewage treatment plants as well. That high concentration on an area of shallow groundwater is of concern. And I think it's time we look for a better location, and just wanted to bring that to your attention and the public's and say it's something we're asking a lot of questions about right now, and we hope others will step up as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Any other public comment this evening? Anybody online, Michelle? Okay. With that, we'll move on to our communications from volunteer boards. Are there any volunteer boards in the audience? Online? Not seeing any or hearing any? Any from the council? Not seeing any. We'll move on to our consent agenda this evening, and I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, I would recuse myself from this vote, as one item does involve my construction company.
Great. Thank you, sir.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
And I second it.
Moved and seconded. Any edits or changes? With that, all in favor? All those opposed, like sign, and that matter passes unanimously. Next, we have our public hearings, which is apparently not a public hearing this evening. It's a matter that's been postponed so many times I can't even, too many times. So this is our first public hearing that's not. An ordinance amending the City of Whitefish Code to add a Article Y, Chapter 2, Title 11, to establish the WBT zoning district, Business Transitional District, as an implementation of the Highway 93 South Corridor Plan. David.
Good evening. So once again, we have the Business Transitional Zoning District before you guys. We've had multiple public hearings on this dating back to over a year ago. Back on November 21st, you guys again held a public hearing. You directed us to make some changes to the code, proposed code, and then bring it back at this hearing. The changes that you guys asked us to look at were moving the majority of the permitted uses into the conditional use permit category, making the frontage and backage road portion mandatory, and then increasing the buffers between that zoning and the residential zoning adjacent. So we made those changes to the code, and as you know, this Highway 93 South Corridor Plan that was adopted did call for this transitional zoning district. It established the intent and purpose of that zone, and we are still confident, even though it's changed quite a bit from what the planning board recommended approval on, that it still does meet the growth policy criteria, as long as you don't change the intent and purpose too much. And a lot of the different things that were in there, even if they're in the conditional uses, there's still something that would be a close enough equivalent to what's allowed in the County B4 currently. As you know, the County B4, their secondary business district, was modeled on our B2 zoning. They changed the zoning to that, the county did. So in that, the areas that we're looking at putting this transitional zone are already zoned County B4, which is one of their more intensive commercial districts. And the intent of this is to create some kind of a zoning district that still could entice those property owners to annex into the city, to get on city water and sewer, and then allow us to do this transitional zone where the city council would have ultimate control over what happens there, and be able to make sure that any site plan met our requirements, that some of the different types of uses that are currently permitted in the County B4, such as storage units and auto dealerships and hotels, would not be allowed. And then obviously be able to get anything that develops there on city water and sewer rather than on septic issues, because there is high groundwater out there and issues with some of the current septic systems. And that would enable us to provide additional buffers to those neighborhoods, and then allow any development that happens there to go through our architectural review, our landscaping ordinance, our dark skies ordinance, our sign code, our subdivision requirements, our water quality protection standards, and all of those things. And so in general, the specifics of the changes, the only uses that we are continuing to keep in there, and there's an updated ordinance on the table there, because when this started, we called accessory dwelling units accessory apartments. And then we made that code change last summer that changed their terminology to say accessory dwelling units. That was not carried over in this because it's taken so long. So that that draft ordinance is on the table that has that change in there that calls it accessory dwelling units. There is a typo on that, on the conditional uses, there should not also be accessory dwelling units as a conditional use, because we made those a permitted use accessory to residential everywhere in the city. And the only other uses, which is what you guys kind of directed us to do, is keeping daycares there. Home occupations are accessory use to residential use in every zoning district. The public facilities is always a permitted use, and then single-family residential would be allowed. Every other use would require a conditional use permit, multifamily, duplex, offices, anything else that anyone wanted to propose there would have to go through the public process and go to the planning board, and the city council would have the ultimate say on that. As far as the bulk and scale standards, with also any building that's over 7,500 square feet would require a conditional use permit. You guys asked us to put a maximum building footprint on there of 15,000 square feet, so that's what's in there. We're looking at, we increased the buffer off of Highway 93. It's 50 feet landscaping buffer when anything that abuts Highway 93 and Highway 40, and 30 feet in general as a front setback. Mary brought up the rear setback issue. The way our lot's defined, anything that would abut a highway would either be a front or a side. You'd never have a rear of a lot abutting Highway 93 or Highway 40. So, but we do have a provision in there for a side yard. Anything that's adjacent to residential or agriculturally zoned properties would have a 30-foot landscape buffer, and then there's a required 50-foot landscape buffer when abutting Highway 93 or Highway 40. And the same with the rear, it'd be a 20-foot setback or 30-foot landscape buffer when it abuts residential or agricultural zone properties. We have some general requirements about shared driveway access and frontage roads are required to provide cohesive internal circulation. Previously, it was more encouraged. Since it's a conditional use permit requirement, we can make sure that happens. And then where highway access can be achieved via adjacent internal street or easement, the lot shall take its access from that location instead of a direct access on the highway, consolidating any accesses. Where there's no adjacent street network, each lot shall provide for a shared access with neighboring parcels. They have to provide shared parking and landscape buffers to protect surrounding properties, and then any exposed utilities or machinery or any other stuff has to be screened in this district. And so in general, that's kind of the gist of it. Again, it needs to be a district that's attractive enough to encourage people to annex, so that we're no longer allowing B4 out there, which is the county zoning, that does have a lot of uses that I don't think that anyone wants to see out there. But it still has to, again, have enough transitional uses that bridges the gap between that business service district and what our county or our existing WB2 zoning is, which is the county equivalent, and what every property that's annexed with B4 has gotten is WB2. And so without this business transitional district, I think we'd have a hard time not zoning something WB2, just because that's the precedent that's been set. And so again, we feel like this meets the growth policy, meets the other requirements to add zoning into our book. And this just creates the zoning in our zoning code. It doesn't apply it to any properties. That'll have to come if somebody decides to annex.
Any questions?
You guys have any questions?
Any questions for Dave on his staff report? Rebecca?
I called Dave earlier today and went through Mary Flower's comments with him in detail, and just to see if anything needed to be changed. So it looks like you did change it to today's date for the staff report and findings of fact to make that current, and then you've changed accessory apartment to ADU already.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And the next one was light commercial and ancillary services. They're defined in the county language, but could you address that, Dave?
So, I mean, that's a general term. This is just in the intent, so it's not in the actual, zoning requirements. We list whatever uses are permitted or conditionally permitted. Light commercial would be like offices or some of the other uses in there. Would not include retail. So it's just a general term. We can't, we didn't want to list every possible use in there that could be, because it's already in the zoning district. So it's just a general term. Light commercial and ancillary services fronting the highway it's directly out of the language from the growth policy, which was updated through that 93 South Corridor Plan, as what the intent of that zoning should be.
Okay, and then there was some concern about storage facilities because one person in particular keeps bringing it up that we don't really. Well, should we remove language that says storage facilities are allowed in enclosed buildings? Because does that open us up to having storage facilities in that section of the 93 South? It's 11-2Y-1, possibly remove a CUP for light assembly and manufacturing, which includes repairing, packaging, storage facilities in enclosed buildings.
So if there was a storage facility, it would have to be associated with that light manufacturing or assembly. The
Okay.
storage units are a separate use, and that's not included. We've removed that out of there. I don't think we ever had it in there. I mean, it's currently allowed in the county B4. I don't even think they need a conditional use permit. They can just put a storage unit up. But that packing or storage facility would have to be, if someone was manufacturing something, they had something on their building, they were storing their supplies to make it, or they're storing their product after they make it. That's what that is within the context of that light assembly or manufacturing. It's not, no one could do a standalone storage unit based on that.
We need to clarify it, or would anybody interpret it the way you just did?
I mean, we would interpret it that way, so that's how we would enforce it.
Okay, you know who will be upset if we don't get it right. And then the next one is guides and outfitters are allowed with a full CUP. That's a new use because the county does not have that in currently, correct?
Yeah, so when the county took our WB2 and used that as the base to create their B4 district, which they copied almost exactly at that time, guides and outfitters were not a use that was allowed in our B2. Since then, after Lakestream Fly Shop moved out of Central Avenue and they moved into the B2, the city council made that a conditional use, and we added that use of guides and outfitters into our WB2 zoning district because we felt it was a more appropriate place for people with boat trailers and things like that operating. And that's why that's carried over into this draft as a conditional use, because that's currently allowed in our secondary business district as a conditional
Okay.
use.
And the same with microbreweries and microdistilleries are allowed with a full CUP in this location. Any
correct.
comments on that?
Yeah, that's again similar to our WB2.
Okay. And then where we're at with setbacks is 50 feet on 93, 50 feet on 40, and it's 30 feet on the side yard adjacent to the neighborhood, which was increased from 20 feet by the mayor's request at one of our many previous meetings. Okay, the next one is, could you address the issue of setting aside setbacks for the roundabout that could potentially go at 93 and 40 in the future for traffic control?
I mean, that's an interesting idea. I don't know exactly how much room the state would need to build a roundabout. Typically, they require right-of-way. And we are requiring a 50-foot setback off of highways 93 and 40, which I think is, way more extensive than we have in any other zoning district as far as a setback requirement. So, I mean, within that additional 50-foot setback, there's probably room. That is one of the widest parts of the highway right-of-way as well. MDT, has a big swath through that whole section. And the only other limiting factor would be, town pumps already developed. They don't have any very large setback there. That might limit, where a roundabout could go. I don't know, but.
All right, Craig, do you have any comments about that?
No, I mean, I think Dave raises a good point in terms of the town pump already being built, but that additional 50 feet should give us ample room at the other three intersections or corners of the intersection.
Okay, thanks. And then the final one is that, people are worried that we're going to screw this up and have something horrible there. So could you explain that we do site planning and that anything that comes in that area will actually have to go through a site plan? Could you explain that to the public, please?
Well, so, with most of the uses that anyone wants to put in except for single family having to go through a conditional use permit process, they will have to come to our city site review. They will have to submit a site plan, detailed site plan that meets all the criteria For each of the, a lot of our different uses have specific criteria that have to be met we have a special provisions section that outlines, all different types of criteria, like multifamily has a whole list of things that they have to meet to make them livable and how they're established on the lot. They'll have to meet those criteria as well as our other conditional use permit criteria of how it, every conditional use permit goes to, with how it's consistent with the growth policy, how it affects traffic, how it, fits in with the neighborhood character. So yeah, any uses that go through that will all have to meet all those criteria and then go through public hearings, have an opportunity for the public to weigh in, and then the planning board will review it and make a recommendation, and then the city council will ultimately decide if any of those things.
Because they're coming in as this full conditional use permit, they would be going through the planning board and then going to council.
Correct.
So there will be ample opportunity for people to give feedback. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Giuseppe.
Well, listening to this conversation, I have two questions. One, for the sake of the public. David, if we do not pass this zoning ordinance, is it realistic that tomorrow whoever wanted to build any non-pleasant type of development, such as storage units, which does not require city limits, is outside of our control and purview?
Yeah, that's correct. That whole district of that is currently County B4 is in Flathead County. They have no building permit requirements. They have, no architectural review standards, and anyone could build a storage unit or another car dealership or whatever out there right now.
Thank you. And our job proposing a zoning overlay regulates only in the case someone petitioned for annexion. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's correct. We're just adding this to the books, and then if someone chooses to want to annex, and the city council would have that opportunity to review their annexation request and decide whether to annex them or not. And if they do, this is the tool that we can add this zoning to that property.
Thank you. And now, for my benefit, in the page 113 of the packet, the proposed motion mentions WZTA 22-01. I
Correct.
assume now it's 23.
Well, the ordinance number would be different than the staff report number, but
Okay.
yeah.
And
But
what
that
would
was
that
the
be?
staff report number because it was the first thing that we brought forward to you guys in 2022.
So do we know what it would be now, 23 what? Whatever it is.
Yep.
Oh, it's a
and,
res-
and if you,
Okay, all right. Thank you then. Oh, that's true, that's the staff report. Thank you.
sure.
Any other questions for Dave?
One question for me. There is no maximum density to the residential development allowed in this district, correct?
There is not. We could amend the PUD ordinance to set a maximum density with the PUD, with the affordable housing or whatever, but, our WB2 does not have a maximum density, but it does have one that's if you do a PUD. But obviously, anything that comes forward, you guys will have the opportunity to review, and if something's subdivided or whatever, you guys will have to be able to oversight to determine if something's too dense or not.
Rebecca?
I thought of one other thing to clarify, is that in our commercial zones, Dave, you said that we don't have a lot, oh gosh, I forgot the terminology, like 40% of the
Lot coverage?
Yeah,
Yeah.
lot coverage. So in this area, if it came in as a commercial use, it wouldn't have those kinds of criteria either. Is
No, but we have setback requirements.
Yeah.
A lot of our commercial zones don't really have, like downtown has no setback. They're very minimal. In the B2, if you're adjacent to other commercial property, there really isn't much of a setback.
Okay.
This one does establish setbacks, and if someone does develop with a PUD, then we'll have open space requirements that they'll also have to meet.
So, and then, because this has been kind of long and confusing, probably for the public as well, I just want to clarify that if this gets passed tonight, what can be built there without going through a CUP is accessory dwelling apartments, ADUs, daycares, daycare centers, home occupations, public utility buildings and facilities, publicly owned or operated buildings and uses, and residential Class A manufactured homes and single-family dwellings. So without going through the planning board or public process with the city council, people can do all of that if this is passed,
Yep.
according to our
Yeah, it's
standards.
basically a residential zone that has some light commercial options
That
and
won't-
and higher density residential options as a conditional use, yeah.
That will not affect the people that are living in their residences in this area. So then what we've done as a city is we've created more oversight by requiring full CUPs for pretty much anything else. And that will be going through the planning board and the city council.
Yes, Steve?
My question is about lot size. I think that was mentioned in Mary's report, or Mary's letter. So if somebody wants to build a single-family dwelling unit out there, it's not zoned one of our residential zoning, so what criteria do we apply when they
Well,
come
we
in
allow
for a
one
permit?
single-family dwelling per lot. So if they wanted to add more, then they would have to come in for a subdivision and subdivide the lot, and then we'd have our subdivision review process to look at
Okay.
that.
Okay, and then they could still build a single-family unit on each lot?
Yeah.
Okay, and that, does that carry setbacks and those
The
kind of
setback
things?
requirements would be the same, and they're,
As the, okay.
for
in-
each of
in the
those,
other
yeah,
section.
each of those single-family lots, and they're pretty big setbacks, so it would limit, the lots would have to be big enough to accommodate those, 30-foot front setback and a 20-foot, and they're bigger than all of our residential zones.
Okay.
Yeah.
But they'd have to meet those?
Yep.
Okay. All right, I think I get that. Thank you.
Any other questions for Dave? I would entertain a motion, one way or the other.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, I move to approve ordinance number 23 help me here, 2 or 3? 04. An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Whitefish, Montana, amending the Whitefish City Code to add Article Y, Chapter 2, Title 11, to establish the WB-T zoning district, a business transitional district, as an implementation of the Highway 93 South Corridor Plan.
Seconded by Councilor Norton.
Just to correct the record, it's ordinance 23-01.
Yeah, I thought it was 01 as well.
23-01, thank you.
Correct.
Any further discussion?
Yes, I'd like to address a number of letters that I have received personally as a city councilor and we as a group of people concerned about this ordinance creating space that will preclude affordable housing. The ordinance will not affect, I repeat, we discussed this, but I want to make it clear, will not affect any of the implementations that anyone, any owner not annexed to the city will be able to do within county regulations. So if they do not require services from the city and they do not petition to annex, this ordinance will be mute to them, will not affect those property owners. Hence, I think we're trying to find a compromise to attract enough property owners to come and petition for annexation, taking our services, paying towards the city, as well as managing and controlling a little bit the type of growth we want to see in that area. Thank you.
Any further comments? Dave, excuse me, Ben.
I would offer a friendly amendment. My amendment would be to change under conditional uses, under residential, it has two-family duplex through multifamily. I would change that to two-family duplex through a sixplex.
Is there a second to the friendly amendment?
I'll second that.
Thank you. I have a few things to say about it.
Yep.
We need housing, and we need housing bad, and I'm all on board with that. The problem here is, as we've gone through and debated this thing a bunch of times, I'm looking at what's presented here, and this looks to me like more or less the highest density residential zone in town. And it has it has unlimited maximum density. They're very large lots. And I think if we sat down and we looked at what's good city planning, it wouldn't be to try to put the highest density, and it's not even on the edge of town, it's out of town for all intents and purposes today anyway. And so every person that lives there has to, every time they want to go to the grocery store, they got to drive all the way into the middle of town. It has zero walkability of any kind, which is probably the only area of town that doesn't practically. And it just, in my mind, it represents poor city planning for us to be trying to push high density projects out of town like that. As our city attorney has stated before, sometimes, you know, conditional uses, you can't always turn them down for various reasons. And I think the developers are owed some predictability about what the council thinks is appropriate there. And so, you know, if it's a conditional use permit, I feel like we're just going to get applications for the largest apartment buildings in the Flathead down there. And I don't know that that is really what I would have in mind. And so in my head, this would be missing middle housing and below, and that's what a sixplex to me is. And I hope when we revise our growth policy that we will encourage higher density development more towards our core, and then keep the lower density development further out of town. So that's my reasoning.
Rebecca.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Ben, I can't support it because I do think it's a really great place for housing, and I'm not sure that we should restrict ideas at this point. So, but I appreciate your intent.
Any further comments on the friendly amendment? Not seeing any. All those in favor of the friendly amendment, raise your hands. Those opposed, like sign. That motion passes 4-1, and we'll move on to the original agenda, or original motion. Any further comments? Yes.
Yeah, I just want to weigh in on how long a process this has been from trying to first conceptualize what we want to do out there and what we want to see. And I think we took a lot of public comment, we took a lot of things into account when we did this. And I think making sure that a CUP is required for pretty much any of the business uses really helps. And I think that we have pretty strong footing for why we wouldn't want to do certain kinds of businesses out there. There's a lot of issues that go along with that. So I agree with you, Ben. I don't think this is a great place for housing for our city, not currently. Maybe as the transportation network gets pushed out better, we have better public transportation that gets people into town, then maybe that makes more sense. But now we're just adding more cars to the road. It's like they might as well live in Kyla or Columbia Falls if they're out there, because all those cars are going to come into town if people are out there living. And like you, I am very concerned about affordable housing. And it's not that I don't want to see apartment complexes out there, but I don't think the time's not right for that. Moving most everything to a conditional use was the right move here. It gives us some predictability. If people want to come in to the city, they have to get through. They have to show us that their plan is something that we want to have in the city. And I think that's ultimately what we want out there, is we want to be able to have a public conversation about any new uses out there that are going to be part of the city. And we know, and just to reiterate the points that have been made consistently, is that people can build whatever they want to out there right now, as long as they can get a septic permit. And we don't have any control over it. But if they want to be part of the city, then we get to have a say. And I think that's ultimately what the people wanted out there. So that's all.
Yes, Dana.
Frank, just wanted to confirm what the vote was on the amendment. We have 6 counselors up there, so.
Yes, no, I include me as the.
5 to 1?
Yeah, 5
Okay,
to 1.
thank you.
Yeah. I was going to chime in later, but yeah. On the original motion, Andy.
I guess a couple comments, probably more than a couple. I don't know that I'm still very comfortable voting for this. I think that perfunctory is the word I want to use, although perfunctory, one definition is without much effort, and I can't say that this hasn't been without much effort. Being that we're sitting here almost a year later, I still have concerns that it's kind of window dressing in a way, because I don't know that it's going to either entice anyone to annex, and I don't know that it's going to discourage anyone to annex, either one. And I think a couple of Mary's comments, I think, still ring true with me, and one in the purpose and intent, that residential behind and commercial up front kind of does tend to lead to the sort of strip development that we're trying to not have. But I think the reality is, from a property development side of it, most people are going to want some kind of buffer from the highway, and they're not going to want their front yard on Highway 93 and cars whizzing by at 60 miles an hour. So I think that's probably what's going to happen anyway. I think we've got enough conditioned uses in here, and I'm assuming that what we would probably see, being as how there are large tracks out there, that we would see a consolidation of tracks, or a single large track would come in. And Dave's correct that if we saw something on the housing side, we're going to have to see, unless somebody wants a really big lot, we're going to see a subdivision, and it's going to go through further review. I think we've eliminated most of the commercial uses that we don't really like. Mini storage, that's, had to get that in there, but anyway. So I guess at this point, I'm going to support it, and I was pretty much had myself convinced not to earlier this morning, but listening to people's discussion, I think that that's the good thing about what we do here, and I think we hopefully all come in here every night with an open mind, and we listen to our fellow counselors, and we pay attention to what they say, and that we can be swayed by their arguments, because I think I probably have been tonight. And appreciate Ben's friendly amendment. I think that's very important, because I think you're right. I think we could see a lot of kind of housing product out there, and a whole lot of vehicle trips that we're really not in any position to accommodate currently. And I think that we do need to focus housing towards the core of our community. I don't think we need to put it out there, but I think with 2, 4, and 6 plexes, we can put product out there that is in an affordable category for at least a portion of our population. So I guess I'll support the amendment, and I'll support the motion, and surprised I'm saying that. So here you go.
Any further comments? All those in favor of the motion? All those opposed, like sign. That matter passes unanimously. Thanks, Dave, for living with us the whole time. Good. Next, we have next we have communications from our Public Works Director.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
So this is another topic that we've beat up quite a bit over the last year. So I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes version of my staff report. The full rendition begins on page 105 of your packet. So I think everyone's aware that the Climate Action Plan does call for a solar PV facility out at the wastewater treatment plant property. It's one of 4 priority energy-saving actions in that 2025 emissions reduction target. So over the past year, the Public Works Department has been working with Flathead Electric on a potential community solar project out there. We've presented information to council during work sessions on January 18th and July 18th of last year, as well as just about a month ago on January 3rd of this year. The current proposed project is for a 200 kilowatt Flathead Electric community solar project, which will offset energy consumption on their grid. While panel owners will ultimately be the ones who claim the rights to each panel, the land provided at the wastewater treatment plant will be used to generate about 1/3 of the annual power requirements of the facility. The proposed project will produce 200 kilowatts and include 456 panels, and this first phase will dedicate approximately 1 acre of space for the project. Included in your packet is a final copy of the community solar agreement. This has been approved by the Flathead Electric Board and is supported by staff. And so it is our recommendation that council approve this agreement with Flathead Electric to construct a solar community facility on the wastewater treatment plant property.
Thank you, sir. Any questions?
I'm
Carry
so
on,
bad
or not?
today.
A motion?
Please.
Actually, could I make a recommendation? We just reviewed it, and we missed one line that they were supposed to remove. And so Angie and I just caught this. If, with your motion, you could remove the line under, what is that, 3C, that starts with FEC shall be added as an additional insured on such policies during the period of time that the system remains installed at the facility. MMIA will not cover them as additional insured.
May I make a motion?
Okay. In that case, I will move to approve the community solar agreement with Flathead Electric Cooperative with the change of removing the last sentence in section 3 that speaks to the additional insured.
I second it.
Any further discussion? Any,
Glad we're building this. Hopefully we can build some more sometime.
agreed. All those in favor? All those opposed, like sign. Matter passes unanimously. Michelle again. Communications from our city manager, Dana.
Great. You have my city manager's report in the packet. I will just briefly give you some updates on the legislative items as things are changing day by day. The emails over the weekend are just amazing what gets scheduled. There are currently 434 House bills that have been introduced and 279 Senate bills. Right now, the ones that we're tracking, I roughly have probably a couple hundred that we're tracking of those. Most of these haven't changed with the exception of the restricting use of eminent domain for trails and bike paths, walking paths, equestrian use. That has gone before the Senate Judiciary Committee. It passed, and it was also passed by the Senate, so it's been transmitted to the House. I don't know how much we're going to see that one be killed. It probably, in my opinion, will go through at this point. And that would be impactful for when we need to potentially use eminent domain to obtain right-of-way for building paths. So that's too bad. But the Senate Bill 215 has some amendments. They're more clarifying amendments. There was a hearing on January 30th, and we are just waiting to see what that executive action was that was taken. House Bill 226 regarding pension laws, that bill as drafted originally would cause a significant increase potentially in all cities for the pension for PERS, or the Public Employees Retirement System, to make sure that it's fully funded. And while we support a sound retirement system, having the increase in 1 year is not sustainable for most communities, including Whitefish. There are some amendments that have been made, and it did pass with those amendments. And so, it is going to a hearing on the 7th of this week. So we're tracking that one carefully with the league as well. There is a better bill out there, Senate Bill 29, but the amendments, I think, do limit the increase to 1% a year now, which is what that Senate bill would have done. So, and then the House Bill 244, which revises the Montana Housing Fund rules, that's been transmitted to the Senate, so it passed through the House. We did support that bill. It really just removed some of the restrictions and income requirements for loans from the Housing Montana Fund, so opening up uses outside of just low income. The one that's very concerning to me is House Bill 324. It's a local government expenditure limitation. That one has a hearing this week on the 9th. We will write testimony as well as have our lobbyist in person. It would severely limit local governments from adjusting to growth. Even though they say you take into the average population growth, we know that there are times when you have capital projects that come up due to growth, which could increase your budget by 20 million. If you recall back in the day when we did City Hall or when we did the wastewater treatment plant, the story was that Whitefish was doubling its budget. Well, it was all because of a capital project. That bill does not take into account capital projects. So we'll strongly oppose that one. We are still waiting on executive action from House Bill 337, which is which would decrease the minimum lot sizes across the entire city to 4,000 square feet. That one we did write letter in opposition and provided brief testimony. And then House Bill 369 is a new bill that we will be writing comments for. That hearing's on the 9th this week, and that is about requiring a referendum to adopt growth policies and any growth policy changes. So we would be holding elections. That obviously would be an added cost and delay effective planning in communities. Let's see here. The draft LC 300, which is the short-term rental ones, is now Senate Bill 268. That bill is scheduled for a hearing on the 20th of February. There is a typo in that paragraph. It should be rental, not R-E-N-A-L. That bill, we will, the amendments were not made, so it does not clarify that ADUs cannot be short-term rented. So we will oppose that bill as drafted. If they do make amendments, we'll bring those to council to consider. This is a personal issue with this senator, and what he wants to do with his property and parents' property next to him is what I've heard. So hopefully we can convince him that this isn't the right solution to that one issue, and what our problems are. I'll make sure to, notify, Flathead Families for Responsible Growth. We also have Mary Flowers who can help us, Citizens for a Better Flathead. I have communicated with her with some bills just saying, hey, you might want to be aware of this. And so we're trying to get some other support than just the city being the one speaking in opposition or supportive bills. There is a new draft. It's not in my report, LC 2647. It's about lakeshore protection, and it would grandfather anybody in who has structures within the lakeshore protection zone as of January 1st. And that's a concerning bill. It does allow updates to those structures up to a certain amount. We will also be watching that. It has not been introduced yet. So that's kind of a legislative update. It's keeping me probably the busiest. I am happy to announce that Luke Sponable has, I believe I said his last name right, but Luke has accepted our job offer for the housing coordinator, long-range planner position. He is a master's student at the University of Washington, but prior to that, he's worked as a planner 1 and 2 at the city of Breckenridge, Colorado. And currently he's an intern in Seattle working with the DOT on pedestrian stuff. So he brings a lot of knowledge from transportation to resort town and getting his master's in planning. And so we're excited for him to start. He will start with us on a part-time remote status starting February 21st, but then we'll come on full board or full-time in July. So we are excited to have him. It's been a difficult position to fill, but finally. And I'm glad we waited because I think we have a fantastic candidate, new employee. I've had a request come up from the legislature and the League of Cities and Towns, as well as our lobbyists asked about it. If anybody read the letter from the county commissioners regarding the homeless and this issue down in Kalispell, it was very disheartening to see a letter like that come out, and I think that my personal opinion is that they could have used a little bit more empathy in that letter, whether there are facts in there or not. But the request was if the city of Whitefish would want to write a letter addressing that letter from the commissioners. So I told them I couldn't do that, but I would leave it up to the council if you guys wanted to do any kind of response. It's died down obviously in the media, but I know that there's bills out there that are looking at supporting homeless shelters and centers. There's a bill out there looking for that would provide grant funding to them at the state level. So I will leave that up to you guys if you'd like me to draft some kind of response to them or not.
Ben?
I'm wondering, could you also make comment on, I know you and I exchanged an email or two about the way that the city of Whitefish was being used in the debate down in Kalispell. Could you address that?
Yeah, so we have, this was back in October actually, I think. Bridger and I were I was contacted, and I confirmed with Bridger the rumors going on down in Kalispell is that Whitefish police were just taking our homeless people down and dropping them in Kalispell. That is far from the truth. We address individuals here and try to provide them services that we have here locally. There are some individuals, no doubt, that come through town, jump off the train, and they're looking to go to Kalispell for the services Kalispell has, or Missoula, or wherever they're headed. We do not just bring people down and drop them at Town Pump, as what was told to me. Just get them right into the Kalispell city limits, I guess. The commuter, obviously the buses, they understand that the bus system does bring people down as well. But I think that that's something that, I've made clear with the county administrator. It would be something we would address in the letter as well. Because I think it's important for them to know, we do what we can. The church is here, support people. We support people if they need to get on a train to get back to Spokane. We find a way to help them do that.
Rebecca.
I'm not sure when I should bring this up, but I had a conversation with Bridger that I wanted to, so I think, should I talk about it now because it's germane to this topic, or should I wait? Okay. Bridger, so I called Bridger about how our police chief, first name basis, it probably doesn't work in these settings, but Chief Kelch, and asked him, how do we deal with homelessness, because it's become a hot potato and a very sensitive issue. And it was a long conversation, probably 20 minutes, because the issue itself is quite complex. And we do something called community policing, where we actually are out, our officers are out regularly assessing how our community is working. And so I just wanted, Bridger, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about our approach, which I think is ideal because it addresses each individual's needs at the time, and reassure the public a little bit about how we actually are trying to be sensitive to the needs of people in dire situations. Thanks.
Betcha. Bridger works just fine for me. Homelessness, in kind of getting into this issue with Kalispell, we do deal with things a little bit differently, being a resort town and also a town that has a railroad that goes right through it. And so we do deal with a lot of transients and those type of things in the summertime, and I don't equate them to be the same. I mean, there's quite a bit of difference there. But as we deal with homelessness, it's an individual-based outcome that has an underlying root of why an individual ends up being homeless. And so as we deal with individuals in Whitefish, many times they're coming off the train, sometimes not. They get here some way or another, and usually it's the underlying root of that cause is where the law enforcement gets involved. They break a law because it's substance related, mental health, but there's a lot of other things that come up that we end up interacting with these individuals. Sometimes it's just coming up and asking for resources. In that case, like Dana stated, we will get them to the resources that's best going to help their situation. Many times that's dealt with in our community through the pastoral administration or association by providing them a gas card or a food voucher, and many times we provided hotel rooms for an evening, those type of things. Part of Rebecca and I's conversation was in the wintertime, we don't see that transient population on the railroad as much, but we do end up with individuals that are stranded, that need help, that are out in the cold. We police with dignity and respect. It's part of our core values. If somebody needs to be warmed, we'll bring them to the police department and warm them up. We have room, those type of things. With the warming shelter in Kalispell, that is also a resource, and they hold beds for law enforcement throughout the county to bring individuals there when they're in need. So we deal with it on an individual basis as we encounter individuals that are in that situation and try to get them to the best resources or a quick fix at that point in time. Many times it's just an hour or two interaction with that individual or less, and they leave the area, or we find a place to hold up for a little bit until they can get on their feet.
Thank you for clarifying that. I just wanted the public to know that we are very aware of these issues and that we are proactively working to help.
Dana, I, for one, would be interested in our providing city feedback to the commissioner's letter. Is that a consensus from this group? Yes.
I was personally against the commissioners writing a public letter to the paper as a board, because they have the majority. There are 3 of them. For the same reason, I'm against us as a council to write a letter to the paper, addressing another letter to the paper.
I think we're proposing a letter to the commissioners themselves,
not the paper.
not to the paper.
Yep, it would be direct to the commissioners. Yep.
I misunderstood. I'm okay to talk to the commissioners, to write to the commissioners, absolutely, yeah.
Thank you. I think you've got
I
some
will
direction.
get it drafted and I will get it out to you guys, just individual comments back on my draft, I think would be fine.
Yeah.
We'll make sure we don't have a quorum, but
Great.
we'll make sure I can include all the comments. Okay.
Great.
Last item I have, I know it's a long report today. I did speak with our consultants working on the impact fee update. We will be seeing them on site soon, hopefully within this month. We are intending to plan a meeting with the Impact Fee Advisory Committee, but I'm going to actually extend the welcome to the city councilors as well to, come and understand a little bit more about what's going on. They are proposing some impact fees to go away. There will be some impact fees that will be changing. They're going to be looking more broadly. They would like to look more broadly at parks. And then same with the Emergency Services Center, looking at that and saying, okay, the building's built. Yes, we have a substation and fire hall, but what else can we support police and fire with? And looking at separating those 2 out into, or that 1 out into 2. So if you heard something you don't like, let me know. It's a little bit more than an update, and maybe a little bit more of a rework of what we have. I have held off on the transportation impact fee that I was directed to add as an amendment, only because that impact fee bill had some really bad language about the transportation and the timing of capital projects. That bill has been amended at this point, and as long as it goes through as amended, I don't see a problem adding that back into their work. But at this point, we're just doing the update of the 7 impact fees we have currently. So just want to give you a brief update on that. It is in progress, and I will get out an invite as soon as we know when that meeting is. We'll post it, obviously notice. It's a public meeting, as is with an advisory committee. So I think that's all I have, at least for now.
Any questions for Dana at this point? All right. Yes, Steve.
Dana, you have in your report, you asked for a recommendation regarding the music school, is that correct?
That's my separate staff report, yep.
Oh, that's your staff report, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Carry on.
Okay, we'll go to the staff report. Perfect. In your packet on page 227 is my staff report. The North Valley Music School subleases from Project Whitefish Kids, city-owned land at Smithfields. They have requested the placement of 3 temporary A-frame sandwich board signs for fundraising, for the fundraising campaign for the new youth facility building, which will be the North Valley Music School during their lease. And the locations of the signage is at Glacier Bank on the corner of Baker Avenue and 2nd Street, First Interstate Bank on Spokane, and the Whitefish Credit Union on Baker Avenue. The fundraising campaign is expected to go through November 1st of 2024, raising enough funds to build the facility. It's important to note that that is going to be a city-owned facility, so it's a little unique. But in determining this request, which you often don't see these requests, it really came down to that given the duration that they have requested, 21 months of a temporary sign, and there's no specific special event related to it. There's been changes to our sign code that has eliminated the content-based elements for which fundraising signs have been approved for in the past. And just the unique situation that it is a publicly owned facility that they're fundraising for, I felt that it was appropriate to bring this decision to the city council. Because our current code does allow myself or the city council to approve temporary signs that are placed on public property no more than 2 weeks prior to an event and removed no more than 2 days after the conclusion of an event. When I look at this request, you know, I do have concerns about setting a precedent when it comes to what is really the definition of temporary, is how I look at this. When you do consider this, and my recommendation, it's a recommendation in and of itself, is that when I talked to Deidre, the executive director, was, can you look at doing something different? Fundraising Fridays, something that's not so, it's just not there all the time, because people do get sign fatigue anyways. And could it be something that just shows up on Fridays during this period? So that is something that they're willing to accept. I think they are requesting, though, for it to be every day of the week. During the off days, if you go with the fundraising Fridays, it would be inside the banks where they are right now. But I would recommend that you move forward with the 3 temporary signs on the public right-of-way or immediately adjacent to it. They want to put it on the grass right next to it, and I don't see a significant issue with that, as long as the property owners are okay with that. But have it be approved for just on Fridays at this time. So there's no financial requirement. I did provide you with the city code. It is really a sign request that doesn't apply anywhere except under our temporary signs. Otherwise, it becomes an off-premise sign, which is prohibited. So that is the section of code that we're looking at. So with that, staff respectfully recommends that the city council determine the appropriate location and duration and approval of the temporary fundraising signs.
Thoughts, council?
I've spoken with Deidre about this, and I think the Friday issue is, I think having them once a week for 21 months is enough, to be honest with you. If they were out there every day, I think it would just be too much. So.
Any other comments, thoughts?
I think it's a great project, and whatever we can do to support him, I'm all for it.
Debbie? Sure.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, I move to approve as per the staff request with the input from Councillor Cunell, a sign exposed every Friday for the duration requested by the school.
Does that give you enough location information as well?
I think it would be where it's identified in the packet otherwise.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anybody opposed? I think you have direction. All those in favor? I don't think you needed a motion, but fine. Suffice it to say, there was a motion, it was seconded, and everybody's in favor. Okay, we're down to the difficult task, I'll call it this evening. Communications from mayor and city councilors. I would like to entertain recommendations from each of you as to a representative or representatives for the Whitefish Housing Authority. We've got proposed representatives from each of the designated group participants here before you in this. Do I have a motion or anybody's interest in recommending those?
Do we have a member of the council yet for number 5 there?
Not yet. Do we have, and my question, Dana, do we need any kind of a motion, or do I need to just simply say, these are the folks that have been designated by the specific groups, and they're going to be good, or what? How do we do this?
Yep, so the ones that are recommended by the organizations, because they're acting on behalf of those organizations, we felt that it was important their board appoints them.
Yes.
But it's basically approved, you know, they're appointed technically by you, so they're recommending them for your appointment. So you can go through, and I don't know that you need input from, you know, you can have the ratification by the council, but those ones you would just appoint. And then the city councilor, you'll have to decide who will be on that position, and then go on to the committee interviews that we had today. So the ones that are here for the organizations are outside the ones that we interviewed
Right.
earlier today.
Correct. Well, I'll just take the bull by the horns, and I will appoint the representative recommended by the Whitefish Housing Authority, which is Darwin Hawkins. I'll report the representative from the Housing Whitefish, which is Daniel Snyder. I'll appoint the representative from the Whitefish Convention and Visitors Bureau, which is Rhonda Fitzgerald, and the representative from the Chamber of Commerce, which has been recommended, which is Jeff Raper. As for the mayor or one member of city council, I'm not aware that the mayor has any specific interest. I personally believe that Ben's work in this area and his interest would be my choice to lead this group if he'll have the job.
It still remains an issue important to me, and I'm willing to continue working on it. Yeah. But if other folks, somebody else wants to, I'm not offended, but I would be willing to continue work on this important matter.
Great. Anybody else feel strongly? Then I'm going to appoint Ben Davis as our representative from the council. Going back to our other representatives, I would like to hear each of your thoughts on who we might designate under each circumstance. The first member we have would be a member with relevant public, professional, or personal expertise in real estate development. I think the two that are probably most appropriate for that would be Cameron Blake or Roxanne Gallagher. Do I have thoughts from you on any recommendations?
It's almost like a chicken and egg, because then we'll need to look at fundraising and financing as well.
Correct.
So my thoughts, personal thoughts, would be to consider both, one more skilled into the real estate development with Roxanne's experience in the number of affordable housing, although in Phoenix, which is not Whitefish, and Cameron Blake with the fundraising and financing expertise.
I'm not sure I followed you.
Your question was for real estate development. I'll go for Roxanne Gallagher.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is because I like to see Cameron Blake on the fundraising and financing side of it.
Steve?
I think that in this case, this has been an issue for a long time, and you need to know about this issue for a long time. And I don't know that somebody who's only been here 3 years, no matter how qualified, really grasps the situation in a way that we need somebody on this board to grasp the situation. I think Roxanne has a tremendous resume, but I would prefer Cameron Blake in terms of real estate development, fundraising or financing side. Either of those would be my preference.
Ben?
I find this very confusing how we have to do this. Trying to line up the seats here. I mean, I would like to see both of those individuals on this committee. So I think the resumes of both of them have a lot of experience to give here. So I'm trying to figure out how this jigsaw puzzle fits together here, but it would be, I think both of them would be welcome.
Rebecca, any thoughts?
I think they would both be excellent. I think both of them have had complex backgrounds, and so it's nice that they overlap in some areas. So I would be really happy if both of them were on.
Andy?
I'm a little sad we have 5 really qualified applicants and only 4 positions, quite frankly. I mean, I think if we were only choosing between Roxanne and Cameron, I would choose Cameron simply because she is a little more grounded in the community, and from a fundraising standpoint, going forward, she's much stronger in that, I think, than Roxanne would be. Excuse me. And I think Roxanne said, she goes, well, there's a lot to learn, and I don't know that for a 1-year appointment in a committee that that's doable. So she admittedly said, you know, I might not know. That said, I think she's probably a pretty quick study and wouldn't have an issue. But if we're choosing between those two, I would choose Cameron, so.
And let me just walk back through my thoughts here, and and how I set this thing up was probably not the best way to go. I believe that our two best, or the two candidates that fit the best for members of the public with relevant professional, personal expertise in housing, policy, property management, housing programs, end users of the community housing programs. I think those two members probably ought to be Lynette and Bob Horn, given their backgrounds and expertise. Then we're looking at one member of the public, so I've got 2 that are gone from this. One member of the public with relevant professional, personal expertise in fundraising and financing. Both Cameron and Carolyn could fall under there, as well as one member from the public with relevant professional skills and expertise in real estate and development, and Cameron and/or Roxanne would fit under those, and that's why I kind of juxtapositioned it the way I did. Given that juxtaposition, any recommendations, or do you want me to just take a shot?
Well, Frank, it sounds like you might have, the way I'm reading this is that there's 2 appointments for housing policy, property management, housing programs, end users.
Yep.
And you said Bob Horn and Lynette are the 2 most qualified for that.
Right.
So that means that,
In my opinion. That's where they fit best.
okay. So then we only have 2 positions for, 1 position for real estate development and 1 position for fundraising or financing.
Correct.
So,
3 for 2.
okay. Well, my preference would be Carolyn Pittman for fundraising or financing and Cameron Blake for real estate development.
Great. Any further thoughts? Yep, go ahead.
For a comment. I agree. I think there are 5 excellent candidates here, and I wish we could just have 5 seats, but we don't. You know, I was going to say, I agree, Leonette, sorry if I pronounced it wrong, Leonette and Bob, for those 2 members of the public seats. My leaning was towards Cameron Blake for the real estate development seat and Roxanne Gallagher for the fundraising. And I just thought that was kind of a fair balance for the committee. I mean, we have an easy way to think about this committee is it's a meeting of partners and of groups that are involved. And there's a lot. I mean, we just nominated Housing Whitefish, Housing Authority, CVB, Chamber of Commerce. And then mixed into this, we have Shelter Whitefish and Flathead Families for Responsible Growth. And it seemed fair to me to have 1 seat for each group. And that's kind of what that does. But I think all these members would be great, so I'm not.
This is a really weird idea, but what about leaving Bob off of this? Because he's going to show up anyways, and he always is involved in trying out 4 new people on this committee. I mean, then we'd get the best of all 5 of them, because Bob will probably keep involved anyways. Does that sound bad? But he is very involved, so I think he would help us regardless. But then we'd get 4 new people that have absolute passion for this subject. Just a thought.
Any further thoughts before I have to make my choices? Not seeing any. Yes?
Rebecca could talk me into that system. Rebecca could talk me into her thoughts there.
Yeah, that's not a bad thought.
I
I-
wouldn't
yeah.
disagree with that.
Just speak, Bob was our planning director, and he's invaluable, but I also know he will always be involved in this as a public participant. And so I almost feel like he wouldn't even be offended if we did this, because we know we adore what he's done for our town. So, but that way we would have these new people without, I just like them all so much, so anyways.
Next time I won't ask. I'm just not going to ask. Forget it.
We just did that for you, Frank.
I know, and I certainly appreciate this. No, I can, I guess. And I think the mayor left for a good reason myself. All right, under the circumstances, I think I'm going to recommend that this is just too hard for me. I'm going to go with Rebecca's recommendation. And I will reach out to Bob and let him know why we made the decision we did, and that we do truly, truly want him involved in this process. I think that all of the candidates were outstanding and have, quite frankly, have much to give from very different perspectives. I can make an awfully good argument that I think we need somebody that's been here only 3 years and invested in this community to understand this. I think Cameron and Carolyn both deserve, and I'm very pleased that they both applied. And Lynette, for her stepping up, I think it was a great thing. So those are going to be my appointments, and please let Bob know, and I will reach out to Bob and let him know how this came out.
Can you just confirm and just go through the list so that I know for sure who
Okay.
is Sorry, Frank, there's
No,
a lot
you're
of
good,
conversation.
you're good, you're good.
Okay, thanks.
I'm going to, I guess the best place to put Roxanne would be the member of the public with relevant public personal expertise in real estate. I think I'm going to put, what we got, then I've got, where did I go? I got, right. So I'm going to put, I'll put Roxanne down with the relevant professional expertise in housing policy, property management, housing programs. Cameron as the member with professional expertise in real estate development, and Carolyn in fundraising. Is that copacetic? I did, Lynette, yeah. Yeah.
So going down the line, Cameron, real estate, Carolyn, fundraising, Lynette, and Roxanne for all others.
Yes.
Thank you.
And with that, yes? Thanks. Rebecca, you know how to split the baby. I like this. Next up on ours is councilor comments. Giuseppe, anything this evening?
Yes, very quickly. Number one, I wanted to congratulate the Whitefish Carnival organization for doing a very good job, almost all volunteers. The parade was exceptional, 57 floats. The penguin plunge, I think they broke some records on Saturday morning, and everything went smoothly. So I'm very pleased, and congratulate our councilor, Ben Davis, for being awarded the Citizen of the Year in the Grand Gala of the Chamber of Commerce. Thank you.
Steve.
Yeah, I just have a couple comments. I, like pretty much anybody who gets a ski pass, got an interesting letter from the president of Whitefish Mountain Resort this week about the continued problems they've been having up there. And I feel like it's important that we address this as a community, because what I've noticed is that a lot of people have been getting really upset and frustrated, and I certainly have had my moments with that. And I just want to say that we know that 2020 was a bad year with COVID and the shutdowns, and things just kind of got all out of whack. But I think that for me, at least personally, 2022 was really the hardest year, trying to bounce back and deal with other, crazy things that have kind of come downstream from all that 2020 stuff. And I think that's part of the effect of what we're seeing up on Big Mountain this winter. And I just want to give everybody the chance to think about the fact that you don't have to, you may be frustrated, but grace is a gift you can give in any instance. And I would just like to offer that to everyone in town when they see things that are kind of off track, whether it's up on the mountain or out on the ski trails, cross country, whatever it is. We can tone down our frustrations, and I think maybe as a society we've gotten a little out of whack with that, and I do think that it's part of this leftover effect of what happened in 2020. So just remember that grace is a gift you can give. That's all I have. Thank you.
Right. Ben. Rebecca.
Yep, I wanted to congratulate Public Works for getting a $160,000 Safe Streets for All planning grant. And I was just wondering, Craig, do you want to address anything for the public to know what you're going to use it on?
Yeah, so the Safe Streets for All, this came to council, I think, mid-fall or so. It was a pretty quick turnaround on the application. The Safe Streets for All grant is part of Biden's multi-billion-dollar, transformational budgetary initiative. We applied for the grant to do a safety plan, which will kind of be an extension of our recently adopted transportation plan. Once the safety plan is completed, we can then apply for Safe Streets for All construction projects. So the first step will be to complete a plan where we come up with a whole list of projects, which will essentially be many of the projects in the recently adopted transportation plan, and from there we can get some more money to put some shovels in the ground.
Thank you. And also wanted to congratulate Ben for being Citizen of the Year and for all your hard work on housing. Giuseppe, for your engagement. That's pretty exciting news. North Valley Food Bank also got Business of the Year from the Chamber, which is wonderful. And then at some point, Dana, if maybe next time, if you could update us on the biosolids that Mary brought up. It does sound like kind of a not maybe the right location for something with high groundwater and all that. So I know you toured it, I think, didn't you, down in Summit? Oh, no, okay.
No, I haven't toured it. I think the timing will be off because I think she said February 15th, if I can't recall.
so
And so we won't be able to meet before then. I will tell you that they're looking at using their the state local fiscal recovery act funds, ARPA funds, for that project. And I think Kalispell is on board. And so I think with the communities and Columbia Falls having had to reduce the amount that they would accept, it really pushed the county toward looking for a solution. You know, I'd have to look more into it for you guys. The fact that Lakeside Sewer District is going to be able to treat some of the liquid, I think that's helpful. And that's probably why they've chosen that location. But I can get some more information from Pete and I can email it out to you.
Yeah, I just don't want to make any situation worse with Flathead Lake. All right, thank you. I guess that's all. Oh, I just wanted to tell the public, Senate Bill 142, which I talked about before, which was involving our impact fees. Dana, I wrote an editorial in it, and then I got a heated editorial back, and it actually is going to be okay as amended. So all we have to do, if it passes through everything, is to silo our funds for the impact fee. And then the other provision that was still remaining in there was to pay legal fees for whoever wins a court case concerning impact fees. So legal fees and expert witness fees will be paid by the losing party. So we feel like that was something we can live with, and the most harmful effects from that bill will not be going into law. So thank you.
Andy?
Actually, just one thing, and I had it in my notes, and I kind of was asleep at the wheel on item 4 tonight, communications from volunteer boards, so I'll bring this up now. Interestingly enough, as we discussed earlier this past fall and kind of, I think, latish summer about the commercial use on the Reservoir Trail, which will come to us at the LLC again, Maria, in our meeting in March, correct? Yeah, in March. We kind of skipped a meeting, but anyway, at the Trail Operations Committee meeting last week, it was a pretty interesting thing to hear that the DNRC is also looking at a commercial use policy for the rest of the trail, and because they're getting, like us, an awful lot of requests, and their thing is pretty similar to what we're looking at, is just have a number, and a relatively low number. I don't know, I haven't decided what that is, and you want it, you pay for it, and that's the way it's going to work. So I think that we're on the right track with what we're doing, and as I recall, we are kind of authorized, Steve and I, to go ahead and approve or make that decision for the council. We were not going to come back, correct? Okay. Yes, I do. No. I think we can go back in the minutes, but that was, we had direction, adequate direction from the council, and we would make, we would.
Remember, Maria?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I recall, that the LLAC could make that determination.
Yep. So anyway, that's all I have.
Great, thanks, Andy. Anything further from staff this evening? With that, we're adjourned.